Good morning, good morning, good morning, LinkedIn Live. We're live. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Cheryl. Good morning, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining. I almost thought we were going to have a little bit of a technical problem. Hang on a sec. I'm doing some
A
technical tech.
technical issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trying to get you into my. That's better. Yeah, I almost thought we weren't going to have you, but we have. So thank you for joining us in what sounds like you've had quite a busy week, right?
Yeah. A lot of work. The obviously we came back from our one conference in the US,
Yeah,
where all the ERGs came together, which was absolutely
yeah,
wonderful. And then I've been non-stop since then. So it's just haven't had a chance to catch breath. But there you go.
amazing. And that I guess that is one of the challenges of being an ERG leader, isn't it? You've got a busy day job as well as running the ERG, which is
Absolutely.
something we'll get into. So,
Yeah.
good morning, everybody. If you are listening live, good morning. Please say good morning in the chat if you're listening live. I've got Tony. How do I pronounce your name, Tony? Is it Tony
Fagelman.
Fagelman?
Yeah.
Fagelman.
Fagelman. Yeah.
Tony Fagelman from Xerox, who runs the Enable All employee network at Xerox. But when you're not doing that, you have got a big busy day job, which is program director. Does that mean do you run like the PMO for
No,
Xerox
so
effectively?
as a program director, I run all the
Yeah,
major programs that we do in Xerox,
right.
usually in EMEA, but I have done
Yeah.
global programs,
Okay.
and I specialize in the government department solutions.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
spent the last 7 years really mostly doing government department solutions. So just come
Ah.
off the back of the Ministry of Justice after 3 years on that. So
Right. So very busy and an interesting week to be talking, after the budget announcements
yeah,
from this week as well. Likely to be some big infrastructure programs that get been kicked off
yes,
fairly soon, I guess.
indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting over the next few years. I think
Yeah.
there's no doubt about that. So
Yeah. And so for those that don't know, please go and check out Tony's bio. But as we were saying, employee network leads are often relatively senior. As in, I mean, you're probably one of the more senior ones that are running a network, but often, minimum junior, middle management, and upwards. So
I would
everybody
class
tends to
myself
be
as middle
quite busy.
management, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I'm middle management. I'm not senior. I don't sit on the ECs either in the UK or globally. So
Oh dear. So for those that don't know, obviously, so we met when we were doing something for Every Mind at Work, which is an amazing organisation. But just some people maybe don't know the history of Xerox and ERGs and employee networks. And you talked about this amazing conference in America. So for those that don't know, just tell us something, a little bit of the history of
sure.
Xerox and its networks and etc. And then leading up to your network, which is probably still one of the newest at Xerox.
Yeah. So Xerox, it's a household name in the US. So obviously, people over here we say photocopy. In the US, they say Xeroxing because Xerox invented the
Yeah.
photocopy machine, and that was 120 years ago. Which
Wow.
is, when you think about that, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So Xerox built itself up to this huge, great company, and had a lot of employees. It was mainly US at the time. Did have some global expansion, but in the 1960s, during the race riots,
Hmm.
in 1964,
Yeah.
there were requests to the then CEO, Joe Wilson, to get involved in what was really seen as being something that was affecting the whole of the US,
Hmm.
and there were a number of very passionate employees, black employees, who decided that they needed to take the message of peace and equality further, and they
Hmm.
got together within Xerox. They basically did a roadshow around the whole of the Xerox establishments, particularly
Yeah.
in the southwest, where obviously all the race riots were. and this actually kicked off in Detroit. And they got in touch with Joe Wilson, and he came out absolutely unequivocally on their side, and helped to set up this network in 1964, which was the Black Caucus Group of Xerox, which became the National Black Employees Association, our first ERG. So we started in 1964. The grandmother, the ancestor of all ERG. And
it is amazing, isn't it? You know, and I think a lot of people probably don't know that story. And I would encourage everyone, if you don't know the story, to delve into it, the history of that first employee network in 1964. And Joe Wilson, as you mentioned, you know, who sadly passed away probably, you know, before his time, but was really instrumental, wasn't he, in creating that culture of empowering employees?
Absolutely. And as our CEO today says, and my MD, Darren, you know, it's in our DNA. It's something that Xerox does. You know, we don't have to think about how we act culturally towards our brethren, towards our colleagues, towards our customers, to everybody. You know, so we work very closely to make sure that our employees are part of the family, and I think that is why, when you look at what we celebrate, we have people who are doing 50 years. We do our monthly celebration. We have a ticker that goes along across the top of the internal intranet site, and it says, you know, the celebrations of how long people have been in Xerox. You know, I'm coming up to I've just gone 14 years, so I'm coming up to 15 years. You know, people 40 years, 50 years. It's something that people do, and they never leave. So we have that that family culture. And people who do leave always say how that's the hardest part, leaving the family of Xerox. You know, work may be different, it takes them elsewhere, whatever, but they feel that they're leaving the family, not the business. So
amazing. It really is a fantastic legacy. Tell us about some of the networks that are at Xerox, and then and why there was this hole, right, that you needed to fill.
So, as I said, the first one was the NBEA, National Black Employees Association. Then there's the Black Women's Leadership Council, which formed out of the NBEA. The Women's Alliance, which is also celebrating 40 years this year within Xerox. We've then got Galaxy, which is 25 years old, 26 years old now.
What's Galaxy?
That's our LGBTQ plus ERG. We have HAPA, which is our Hispanic ERG. ACT, which are Asians coming together, which is Asians and Pan Americans. We have VSMA, which is our veterans. How many have I done there? Obviously got mine, Enable All.
8.
8, that's 9. Who have I left off? The leadership, XLA, Xerox Leadership Alliance. So that's for people who are aspiring to be either better leaders or want to be leaders, or just want leadership advice outside of Xerox, if you like. So how to be a better leader if they work in a community organization as well. You know, and they have a leadership role in that. So that's what that is.
I love that. I've never heard of a network around that. So I love that. That's there's a lot of research that I'm going to be sharing over the next coming months about leaders and the need to you know, enable leaders, you know, all of the things that we think about in terms of authenticity and belonging and all of that. Leaders need that as well. Like, leaders feel the pressure to conform to a certain model. So that's really interesting that you've actually got a network. Tell us about Enable All and what inspired you to start that network.
So Enable All is our newest network. We actually were incorporated in September 2022, so just over 2 years old. And it came about because I was part of the wellness team in the UK, which is a group of UK employees who just come together to sort of like support wellness. Really, it's all voluntary again. It's not a specific role, and I got involved in that because I do a lot of sport. I also had just recently done a master's in sports psychiatry, and we were doing some work around supporting people to get fit and get improve their health through fitness.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I'll come along, I'll help out, and I will just help with some psychology around motivation and keep going with that. So I joined the wellness group, and then out of that, I said, while we were having a meeting one time, I said, why is there no disability ERG? I was a member of a couple of the ERGs just as an ally.
Yeah.
And they said, well, there's sort of been talk about it, but why don't you get involved? And I'll introduce you to our DIB leader, Dr. Yetta Tolliver, who's this amazing woman, who's very driven and very powerful and very exciting. And so I got into conversations with Yetta, and we expanded the discussion to get like-minded people around the world.
Yeah.
There were a number of local chapters already being set up. So one had been set up in India to support our Indian colleagues. One had been set up in Italy, but they were disparate. They weren't organized. They weren't working together. They were doing just things local on the ground.
Yeah.
So this group of people, like-minded people, got together, and we said, what can we do? And we basically built it up from using the examples that had gone previously. So we got all the policies, we got all of the processes, all of the documentation requirement from our other ERGs. Myself and one of the other volunteers, we went through all that, and we created our own specific one for Enable that mirrored what we wanted to do. And then we basically incorporated it. So it is all ERGs within Xerox are incorporated separately. They're not part of Xerox. So that is important. So we're not beholden to Xerox.
Yeah.
So we are separate entities. We are in the process of going through charitable registration in the US. And we go through that process. We kicked it all off. We opened up offers to become board members, and I said I'm happy to be a board member. And then they voted me in as global president, which was a surprise. I didn't think that was going to happen. So someone nominated me, and then it was really nice. So I've been global president since we started.
And I think some of the people listening will the one thing that I think is quite interesting, you mentioned it there, the fact, first of all, that your ERGs in Xerox are incorporated, so are separate bodies to the organization, which I think is interesting, and it sends a message around it just sends a message around the framework, and almost the fact that these groups are, as you say, not beholden to anyone, are empowered to do outside of the remit of the organization, or of the usual kind of like in the line governance, if that makes sense. But also the fact that it's global, and this is something we talked about at the summit that you were at a few weeks ago. There was a little bit of conversation about it. I almost wish we'd had more time to talk about global and the challenges of global networks. Now, you mentioned that there were already a couple of local chapters, but they were maybe a little bit disparate. So just talk to us maybe about the challenges and all the benefits of having a global network, and how it works, and how how the structure sits below that incorporated body.
So sure. So what we do is, as a global network, we have representatives from all over the Xerox environment. So Xerox is a global company. It has representation in 110 different countries in the world, and we have partners as well within the others. So we actually, as a organization, Xerox spans the whole world. And what we need to do as a global ERG is be able to address all of our employees and their families, because overall it's beyond the employees. It's to cover the families as well, and the communities around that, and say, okay, how do we make sure that you have a voice within the disabled community, within Xerox? And so we make sure that all of our documentation, all of our information is made available in all the countries. We don't translate it, although our next training piece will be translated into the four main languages, because it's an offer we've now got within our training opportunities. But to date, we haven't been translating our policies and procedures, but it is something we're going to look at. But within Xerox, there is this drive for standardization of language. So most people who are employed within Xerox speak English.
Okay.
We have AI solutions that allow people to translate anyway, so we can work with that. Yeah. But there is this overarching element within all of the ERGs. So all of the ERGs have a global board, and the global board is responsible for the global activities of the ERG, and responsible to, but not sort of underneath, not driven by Xerox. So we will talk to the EC. We have our quarterly meetings with Steve Bandowitz and the whole of the EC. And we've got ours coming up in 2 weeks' time. On the 15th of November, we'll be having our meeting with Steve. We give our presentations, and he basically asks where we are, what he can do to help. So that is important. That happens globally. We also get globally a stipend from Xerox.
Okay.
It's not a large amount of money. It's enough to allow us to do to bring in guest speakers, or to create services or products, or to just operate where we need to make sort of expenditure. So our website, obviously we have a website costs for hosting and stuff like that. So, you know, that just ongoing costs. And Enable All itself, we don't charge for membership. We don't have sponsors at present. So this is the way we keep going. So that's our global board, and I have a full board. I've got a treasurer, I've got two co-treasurers, two treasurers. I've got a VP, I've got a comms director, I've got a secretary, and then each of the chapters have a representation on their board, on our board. So I've got a representation from the Italian chapter, from the Indian chapter, from the French chapter, from the US chapter. Surprisingly, we don't have a UK chapter. It seems to just drop on me.
So you are the UK chapter.
I am the UK chapter. The UK actually has quite a large membership. As membership goes, we peaked at 197 in members. We've dropped off slightly because of the reinvention, and people have been leaving the company. But so I'm currently the only person running the UK chapter. But that's how it works, and then it cascades down. So the local chapters then work around their local activities. So they will say, for example, we're going to support a local disability chapter. So in the UK, we are supporting the Shaw Trust, and we are sponsoring the Disability Power 100, which takes place, the Disability Power 100 Awards, which takes place on the 20th of November. Please tune into that, everybody. It's going to be fantastic. But that's an amazing thing that the Shaw Trust does every year. And we're sponsors of that. So that's the Xerox Enable All.
And what would you say are the main benefits of having the global board? Because I think sometimes, and some of the conversation that we had at the summit, sometimes, you know, when people think about global employee networks, or even just the challenges around employee, you know, engagement or employee inclusion, they think of things like differences in quality of data and how things are measured, and different regulations and employee laws and T's and C's and all of that. So so we've got that side of things, but I guess if people were to think about particularly disability as an employee network, we know that there are lots of things that need to be done around, you know, reasonable adjustments. And then, as you said, there's things about how we support the wider community. And you mentioned some of the things that we're doing in the UK. So what would you say are some of the benefits of having that global network? You know, what do each of the chapters kind of pick up or, you know, learn from each other? What's really worked that you've seen?
So first of all, you talk about difficulties in disability, just the use of language. You know, what we call, so in the UK we try to say people with disabilities. That's our sort of overall use of the word. So we don't say the disabled anymore. People with disabilities. In France, they don't use that at all. They say abled or blind. I can't remember what they call now, but it's basically they don't use the word disability.
Right. Okay.
In the US, again, different language. In India, different language. So we have to be encompassing as a global ERG, which our other ERGs don't have that problem, by the way. You know, that's just one that's sort of completely on us. But what's the advantage? The advantage is I can take a local idea and I can grow that into a global product. So I take our training, for example. We've just finished. It's going to be launched in Q1 next year. Our disability bias training. So this is implicit bias.
Right.
Now, this came out of a discussion I was having with a UK person who felt that, you know, we'd just done our implicit bias training, and it came back saying, well, there's nothing on disability. And I said, you're right, there isn't. Not, you know, it's just one of the implicit biases that are just sort of skimmed over as they talk about implicit bias. So I said, okay, well, you know, I'll talk to my board. And that came out, and we've, as I say, it's about to be launched in Q1 next year. And it's specific. It's how do you approach implicit bias around disabilities? And again, you know, at the one conference, John Bruno, our president and COO, was talking about implicit bias and how important it is to understand everyone has implicit bias and how we overcome that consciously. And he and I were then talking from that, because, you know, the driver around that, and that you don't get that at a local chapter. You would not get that in that ability to take local identified elements and take them all the way up to the EC. Other things that are absolutely important that you take again from local to global and global to local is local identification of groups and activities that can grow and be taken into a more global aspect. So again, I was talking to a member of UK member about neurodiversity. They had recently been diagnosed as an adult ADHD with autism. And we were having a discussion around what can we do with that? How can we take that forward? Now that is one of our pillars for 2025. And we're looking at neurodiversity as a main way to progress things within that element. And that's really important, but that's driven from you know, a local conversation.
It's an interesting one, you know, because one of the challenges that a lot of networks have is, for example, you know, lack of resources or lack of, you know, getting senior leader buy-in. So I guess one of the benefits of having this global structure is actually you can get those ideas surfacing up, you know, and then you can get the resources behind it. You know, maybe there's a little bit of budget there, or, you know, as you say, you can get them discussed with senior leaders who can then get switched on. We've got a question here from Sophia. Good morning, Sophia Nichols. Sophia's question about going back to the training that you mentioned around implicit bias, etc. Are people with disabilities supporting and helping to run the training on disability and implicit bias? Great question, Sophia.
So first of all, I didn't say at the start, So I have a disability. It's an invisible disability. I am happy to talk about it. I didn't for many, many years. I am now. My daughter is profoundly deaf, so we have it within the family. So yes, I take my knowledge, my experience, my family experience to anything I do within the ERG.
Yeah.
But the question is, are we using disabled people to support our training and delivery? So the delivery is it's animated, so it's a we don't have to worry about that. It's and it's been produced, but we have taken it out to people with disabilities and said, are we happy with what we're saying here? Does this fit in the right model? Are we using the right language and all the rest of it? So it's not just the board. Now the board has a lot of experience with working with people with disabilities or have disabilities themselves. So they have all had input into what we've done, but we have also taken it out. And I think that's really important. If you don't take it out and you don't test that product, that solution, that service, how do you know you're hitting it the right message, the right information, the right actions are taking place? So great question. I hope that answered it. So you were saying, what were you saying, Cheryl? You were asking
just no, I was just summarizing to say, that this advantage of when you've got a global structure, that when you have ideas that maybe come, they may come from one local chapter who are maybe quite small, especially where I have some clients where they're globally dispersed. They're not huge, there's only maybe a couple of thousand in the whole organization, but very globally dispersed. So that means sometimes in some locations that are very small, there may be less than 100 people. So the advantage sometimes of having a global structure is you get a bit more resource, a bit more budget, etc., behind what could be a very small idea that might not go anywhere if you didn't have that global support, right?
So I was talking to one of the attendees at the ERG Summit about their ERG, which was a family ERG. Do you remember there was a lady on stage talking about it? And I was talking to another person about it. And I said, how does that work? Because families are obviously really, what's the support requirement? Or what are you addressing with a family ERG?
Yeah.
And they said, it's more like a place to talk and of being, and again, exactly as you put it, they were a small organization. SME, they were an SME. There were about 700 people in the whole organization. And it was Europe-wide. It wasn't global, but it was Europe-wide. So it was in about 15 countries. But not many people in each country, with the headquarters in the UK. So they had about 200 in the UK and then the rest. So they all would come together, maybe, and they only had about 80 or 90 people in the ERG. But they would come together and they would sort of like talk about what it is they want to do. But that was coming from France, from Germany, from Italy, from the Nordics. And I think that the fact that they all brought together and came together was A, driven by size, but B, also that particular ERG could be global in nature. It affected everybody. We talk about within Xerox, where do we lie? What is our drivers in terms of our membership? Enable all goes right across all the ERGs. Anyone can have a disability. 1 in 2 people will get cancer in their lifetime. Cancer is classed in the UK as a disability. 1 in 4 people will identify as having a disability over their life, not counting cancer. Those sorts of numbers say, okay, you're going to get or be affected by some form of disability in your working life. Therefore, you're in that position to have that.
Absolutely. And one of my other questions, and this is something that is often asked, and there's this thing about how do you grow and identify members and get people to to take part in this, right? And that challenge must be magnified, I'm guessing, when it's global. So how do you actually do that? And I'm guessing, does Xerox have almost like a playbook for doing that? You know, is it
which we
embedded
did
in?
have a playbook. We were discussing this
Yeah,
at the one conference. You know, so we've grown from nothing in 2 years to, as I said, just under 200 people have been involved and a part of the organisation.
Yeah.
We have about 20,000 people in Xerox. About 5,000 are members of ERGs. And one of the things that Steve B, our CEO, has said to all of us, the global leaders, why isn't everybody a member of an ERG? Why have we not got 20,000 members in the ERG? How do we grow that? How do we make that happen? How do we reach out and make that happen? And I think you have to have interesting content and a reason to be part of an ERG. You know, yes, we all want allies. Yes, we want people who will doff the hat and say the word and go, yes, of course I back what you do. But that doesn't necessarily assist us to grow what we want it to do. So we need to work around that.
Yeah.
As I say, interesting content, quality of information, so people recognize that what you're giving is worthwhile.
Yeah.
And has value to them.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're not just reaching out and saying, if you have a disability, this is what you need to be able to do, or this is how you approach this, but actually say, if you have a disability, this is how you can take something to your leader, to your manager, and say, I need some form of support. And I'm not talking about yes, I need a special chair, or yes, I need to be able to do this or do that. It's how do you treat me as a person with a disability?
Yeah. For
example, I have high anxiety. I can't have the camera on when I'm in a meeting. You know, I had this conversation with someone. But you're insisting I have the camera on when I'm in the meeting, and that's giving you more anxiety. And therefore, and then you're saying I'm not engaging in the meeting, and then and the snowball is there. How do you have that conversation? That's the sort of information. That's the sort of thing that we can help to foster and generate, and then because of that, you get people go, that's what I need. That's
I know where to go.
Yes.
Yeah. It's I sort of call it information. Where do you go for that information, support and advice? So how do you build that community of information, support and advice? But I have on my to-do list of educational videos, I will be doing something about growth strategies for ERGs, because this is coming up as a common theme. Thank you, Sophia, for clarifying. Parents and carers needing spaces to feel that they're not alone. I wonder if all ERGs principally are about finding spaces of belonging and being human in community. The belonging thing is definitely, you know, that definitely sits at the core of a lot of the ERGs. And then something that you said there, Sophia, in terms of community, one of the things I started challenging some of my ERGs with is in terms of creating that sense of community, especially as more of us are, you know, online and we're often doing this virtually. My challenge is, how do we create the Mumsnet? Right, Mumsnet, for those that are in the UK, and I think I can't remember if Mumsnet is global yet, but Mumsnet have kind of figured out how to create this kind of virtual support network. It's where you know, people go, mums and dads now actually go, if maybe baby's been up all night and they need some advice in terms of what to do, right? And so my challenge out to networks at the moment is and this is something that I'm going to be releasing some more content on, is how do we grow these communities? So what are those growth strategies that you need, whether it's local chapters or global chapters or global ERGs? But then also, how do you build that sense of community? You know, what does that look like? You know, whether or not you're using Viva Engage or Slack or whatever it be.
Yeah, I think it's a huge challenge. You know, we have a community via the website. We have our Viva Engage. We have our SharePoint site. I think, you know, do I interact with my members? No. Do I want to interact with my members? Absolutely. Do I want to feel that they can come to me, and people do. I'll do a webinar internally, and after that webinar, you can guarantee I will get 3, 4, 5 emails and 1 or 2 phone calls.
Yeah,
which is great. But hold on, there was 130, 150 people on that webinar. How do I maintain that connection? How do I make sure they're... please tell me when you find that out, because I'd love to do that. But
yes, more to come. I'm speaking with an organisation called Swoop, who I'm hoping to actually get at the next ERG Leader Summit. But they actually do some benchmarking. They work with Microsoft. They used to do benchmarking on Yammer, which a lot of people know. Yammer was then taken over by Microsoft, etc. Became Viva Engage, and they have a benchmarking report. They've actually got a virtual conference coming up very soon, but I'm hoping to get them along to the summit to talk about this, like what is best practice when it comes to Viva Engage communities, and how do you actually almost like give it a little bit of light touch moderation and all of those things to actually encourage community participation. So more to come on that, definitely. Before we go, because I'm conscious, Tony, we've got a whole day's work to get on to. What tips would you leave for anybody that's maybe either thinking of starting a network for people with disabilities, and also just some of the tips around success for global networks? What would you leave as your final tips for anybody watching today?
Find people with a passion.
Yeah,
that's the key one. I mean, people say to me, you are so passionate about what you do, and I don't feel necessarily that I'm passionate. What I feel is I just want to take it out there and make it happen.
Yeah.
But you find people with a passion, and that passion then you direct. So find people who can then direct that passion, because it can be scattergun if you don't have someone who can actually make it happen.
Perfect.
That would be my one thing. That's the takeaway. That would be what the takeaway is. Okay. That's when starting up. When operating, you need to have a board of people who have got the skill set to do the requirements that you're doing. So I have a treasurer or 2 co-treasurers who can do what I need to happen. I have a secretary who gives me my notes and gives me all the information, and is able to give me back all the information I want. A membership director who gives me information about them. Find those people, because you don't have time. Yes, we all know it tends to be 1 or 2 people that do all the legwork, but actually it looks like that, but there's other people behind are giving you the information to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said there. I'm going to summarize. First of all, just Sophia, thank you for your comments around growth. I think it works best when the community starts from the ground up by those who have the why. Absolutely. I say start with the why, find your tribe, make a plan.
Yeah,
I love that. Start with the why, find your tribe, make a plan. And absolutely, the 2 things that you said there, Tony, in terms of your tips, people with passion absolutely needed, because as we were saying, often this is being done on top of the day job and often unremunerated. But the second thing, also finding the right balance of skills, which is critical, because you do need people that are really good at detail and good at organizing things and getting things done. Then maybe you need a few people that are more kind of high energy and will drive things to completion. People that are good with people. So you really do need this mix of skills to actually get things done. So thank you again, Tony, for joining this week's conversation.
My pleasure.
And sharing some of the Xerox stories. For those that want to find out more about Xerox and the work that Tony's doing, and you mentioned something, the charity that you're supporting later this month, was it the Shore Trust? Wasn't it?
Yeah, Shore Trust. Disability Power 100.
Please do go and check that out. I'm loving at the moment. I love seeing employee networks reaching out into the wider communities outside of the organisations. I think it's something that's incredibly important. So thank you again, Tony. Thank you if you have been listening to this live. If you're watching on the replay, thank you for taking a bit of your time out of your day to listen into this.
My
Tony,
must say hello.
I have one of those as well. Literally identical. Sophia was just saying, sure, trusts are amazing. Sophia, Tony, I don't know whether you met Sophia at the ERG Leader Summit, but Sophia also does work with individuals with disabilities and with organisations as well. So maybe a connection for you there for you to create afterwards. Perfect. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Tony, thanks again. And I hope you all have an amazing weekend.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody.